You're watching TVC Breakfast. This is Talk Time. The federal government's two-day national economic retreat in Abuja, of course, ended Tuesday with a lot of promise. Plans for the generation of distributable 10,000 megawatts of power, 2,000 of those this year. The injection of 350 billion naira to stimulate the economy and much more. Of course, economist and former presidential candidate, Patu Tommy, we're hoping to speak with him this morning. But right now, another economist and Professor Ken Ife of the Africa Business Roundtable is joining us from Abuja. Good morning to you. Many say that, yes, this economic summit retreat is really timely. I mean, looking at areas, very vital areas, agriculture, solid minerals, investment, industrialization, infrastructure services, investing in people. Those are some of the major, issues that were raised during this summit or retreat, if you like. Now, looking at the theme, which looks at the states driving, being ahead in driving this economy, is this retreat really timely? Let me just put it that way first.
I think it's very, very timely because the nation is the nation is in trouble, and this is the best time you can have this meeting. Mm-hmm. And it is very promising to look at what has come out of the meeting. It raises a lot of hope for the future.
Now, with 350 billion naira, when you hear that figure, it sounds big in itself, but for an economy as large as Nigeria, is that really enough to,
Well, it's symbolic. It's a symbolic gesture because when you look at CBN has put aside 1.36 trillion naira intervention fund to deal with a lot of the areas that this is going to deal with. But then what is more important really, which is why I say it's symbolic, is if you remember the onset of this administration, the president summoned a CBN, budget office, a debt office, and addressed the problem of the states, the non-payment of salaries. So this is the same. This is the same intervention because we wanted the federal government to address the non-payment of contractors because they've been laying off staff. And you want to remobilize them to persecute the current budget. So this is very, very timely because you are going to stimulate the economy again and increase the output and increase the demand in the economy. So it's very, very important. It's symbolic, but it's not by any means all that is coming into the public and private arena.
Okay, let me go to Professor Patu Tommy now, who is joining us via Skype. A number of people looking at some of the issues, vital areas that this summit, looked at, talking about agriculture, solid minerals, infrastructure, power, which this government plans to, improve by 10,000 megawatts in another 3 years. Some say that it has not touched the most fundamental aspects of the economy. But what do you think about what they have been able to come out with so far?
Well, I cannot pretend that I know everything that has been come up with, but I have a sense of exhaustion on these matters. The problem with Nigeria is not another summit. I have been to many of them. Problem with Nigeria is a leadership deficit. I don't think that we have yet people who are passionate about Nigeria's future, who have thought it through very clearly and will sacrifice anything that our children may have a better future than we have. I think that's the real problem. And we can talk numbers from now till eternity, and it's not going to change much.
So are you saying then that there is no hope, even with this summit that brought together all 36 state governors and, of course, some ministers to look for a way forward to, drive this economy forward very quickly?
There's definitely hope. There's hope, certainly hope. I'm not sure how that hope will be immediately realized with the way we do things, but there is hope. I mean, I've seen it happen in many countries that looked hopeless, and when the right time comes, the right kinds of people will come together and will offer the right direction. I'm not convinced that the elements are working in our favor currently. I'm hopeful that that will change. I think that we had a classic opportunity in 2015 to get everybody into the house, pissing out, as they say. Unfortunately, we managed to get many people pissing into the house, and it's not looking as it should look.
Okay, let me go to Professor Ken. If I don't know if you heard Professor Patu Tommy there. He doesn't seem to be too excited about this economic summit. As far as he's concerned, we've had so many in the past, but the real problem is the issue of leadership, people who can really, have this vision and who truly have the interest of Nigeria at heart. Okay, let me break it down. They're looking at agriculture and solid minerals to actually be the catalyst to turn this economy around. But looking at what we have on ground right now, do you think we're prepared to, make agriculture the focal point of this economy?
I think we are. But let me start with my friend Pat. I agree with what he has said, but I think the government needs to understand that the government is just one aspect of the economy. There is also the private sector, but they are the most important aspect, because the meeting that was held is important in the sense that is bringing together the two critical arms of government, that the two tiers, the federal and state, who are both equal actors. They are equal actors in an economy that is on the concurrent legislative list. So, but they have very clear roles to play, which is to take a lead on the delivery of strategic infrastructure to open up the economy. Then also to open up the investment environment and make it far more conducive for the businesses. But in the end of the day, for employment to be created, for jobs to be created, for investments to come into the economy, for us to stimulate the economy, you've got to get the private sector at the middle of this. So if I was organizing the summit, I would have said the first 2 days is a 1 week. The first 2 days would have been talking to the private sector and all the stakeholders. The third day would be for the MDAs on both federal and state level to come together and make a sense of the strategic priorities that have been identified in the first 2 days. And then in the last 2 days, the NEC, which is the ultimate organ, policy-making organ, will now digest recommendations and then agree on and authorize some of those, in addition to what has been the main subjects of their meeting. So what I'm saying is, in effect, we reached out far more to other stakeholders, but nevertheless, is moving in the right direction.
Okay, Professor
And I can say
Tommy,
on the agriculture front.
Okay, just hold that thought. I'll still allow you to make that contribution on the agriculture front. Professor Patu Tommy, it looks like the private sector, that is the real driver of the economy, was left out of the summit, if we're to believe what Ken Ife has just said. With the private sector not necessarily being a part of it, how will this really affect the plans and the hopes, that we have for this economic summit going forward?
It goes to the heart of the point that I've been trying to make. Look, governments, especially governments in Nigeria, do very little to achieve progress. If anything, my own experience is that governments prevent progress. If you look at the way that many in leadership positions behave in Nigeria, the change of government, everything that was agreed with foreign, domestic investors before your time, you cancel it, you do. Property rights are very, very weak in Nigeria. Government is at the heart of the weakness of property rights in Nigeria, and therefore one of the major reasons why investors don't come to Nigeria. As a consultant advising major investors coming from around the world, one of the things I say to them, quite frankly, and I have to be very frank about this, is if you can avoid any regulatory territory, anywhere where government is active as a regulator, avoid it because it will cause you grief. The public sector, the governments of Nigeria, unfortunately, since the 70s, have progressively been more a disenabler rather than an enabler of human progress. In many ways, we speak a lot of grammar, we pick up on phrases that sound good and we shout about it, but in the real way that we act, we retard progress as government. My view is that Nigerians is their country, they have a stake in it, and Nigerians must increasingly pretend that government does not exist and look for ways that they can make their life better without government. In that sense, therefore, I think that the point that Ken was trying to make about the role of the private sector is very important. We need not only a very engaged and active private sector, we need private development agencies, the so-called social enterprise sector. Many years ago, 1985 or thereabouts, there was a major conference in Nairobi that was sponsored by the Aga Khan Foundation. It was to build a tripartite approach to development where governments, PDAs, and the private sector work together to make for progress. It was fantastic. It led to what we call the Enabling Environment Forum in Nigeria, and ultimately became the Nigerian Economic Summit group. And summit after summit, you see people talk themselves hoarse about what to do. And the next week, government behaves as if that summit did not take place in the way that it acts. A big challenge is how do the Nigerian people make the governments of Nigeria act in the interest of the Nigerian people? Because it seems that in the main, the governments of Nigeria act against the interest of the Nigerian people. That is the truth we have to understand. The nature of the politics of Nigeria, the weak institutions that we have, tend to work in a way that, I don't know, somehow gets in the way of the Nigerian people claiming the promise of the founding fathers of Nigeria.
So how can let me come in here, how can Nigerians then make sure that, government delivers on its job when it comes to turning around the economy and all of that? I mean, with the statement that came out of this retreat, making states multiple centers of prosperity and exploring ways to respond to the nation's current economic crisis.
How many states do you see exhibiting capacity for doing anything really seriously? Compare the states that we have today with the Awolowo government in Western region, or the Okbara government in Eastern region, or even the Sadauna government in Northern region, in terms of passionate commitment, clear plans. No, what we have is a prebendal arrangement where states just come to the center to extract a prebend, the so-called sharing of a FAC account. So share the gala, share the booze, as we say in the colloquial of Nigerian entertainment. And we're all dressed up with nowhere to go. I mean, after a while, you can't keep dressing these things up. You have to be brutal and speak the truth. We're going through the same things again and again. And that is why many were hopeful for 2015, that the chance for government to actually change and move one group out gives new impetus to Nigerian people, showing that there are possibilities with what we could do with the Nigerian state. But many have been let down in many ways.
Okay, let me take it to Professor Ken Ife right now. So, Professor Ken Ife, how can we then achieve this vision of making Nigerian states multiple centers of prosperity?
Yeah, I have a positive takeaway from this conference because the states and the federal government are both equal actors on the economy. Secondly, the state owns the land, and the federal owns what is under the land. And two, they are agreeing to harmonize and get their acts together on fiscal responsibility acts. For example, you see them you see them broadly agreeing, although some have implemented, some haven't. But you've seen them agreeing, for example, that they will all go for 30% allocation, budgetary allocation to capital expenditure, which is good because they're all moving in that direction. Then also you see them agreeing that, look, each state should find area of competitive advantage and support and focus on that, which is very good because, let's take palm oil alone. Malaysia is making over $20 billion there. Or is it sugarcane? Brazil is making over $20 billion. In one item, you can challenge the total revenue of the country. But so that is a move in the right direction. But I'll tell you what is even more important, that they're all now conscious of the particular roles that they have to play, and which is complementary in improving the investment environment. If you look at the World Bank doing business indicator, there are 11 of them. 4 of those sit squarely with the state government, whereas the rest sit with the federal government and between the two parties. So they are beginning to come to talk together and align, and that alignment is very, very important for investor confidence and also for private sector operators to operate across the two tiers of government. And for them to now agree they're going to bring some sweeteners, 350 billion naira to re-energize the economy and help deal with some of the outstanding debt for the private sector is very, very encouraging. But I tell you what I couldn't see. I would have been happier if there was a commitment from both of them to allow more accretion to the Sovereign Investment Fund, because that is where we will hope to get more financial support for strategic infrastructure, given the difficulties we're having right now. But that's the only area that I thought was missing. And of course, they were right in identifying some of the key sectors, but we need to see more commitments, more financial commitments to dealing with this. If, for example, mineral is so important, but there's nothing you can do in mineral unless you do geophysical studies and 3D seismic studies, so that investors will know what minerals are, what quantities are there. Without that, they can't do a business plan. So you can talk again and again and again until you have the basic data they need. If this budget should deal only with providing that data, then the following year will be ready for investors. That is the kind of emphasis that would drive this economy. And but of course, I didn't get the full gist of the diversification agenda, because that is one. One is to diversify the economy in the direction of promoting export competitiveness. But on the other hand, you should also look at import substitution and backward integration strategy to deal with the $4.66 billion required every month from foreign exchange. So we've got to attack both sides. And then of course, the general agreement to broaden the tax base and increase VAT in an incremental and staged manner is also very good for them to be at the same page on that particular area. So those are the 3 critical areas we have to focus on. How do we move export? A different set of investment incentives are required to do that. How do we reduce the pressure on foreign exchange with a diversification, import substitution strategy and backward integration strategy? A different set of incentives are required for that. And how do you broaden the tax base so that the government can get more resources at its disposal, and at the same time focus on opening up the investment environment, making it more friendly to investors. And I also like the fact that they are focusing on PPP, agreeing to go that way. Why wouldn't they? If you look at the Vision 2020, 35 trillion was required for infrastructure. Federal to bring 11 trillion, state 9 trillion, but private sector 15 trillion. Doesn't that say that the preponderance of investment required is expected to come from the private sector?
Okay, let me go over to
current financial situation. Both the federal, they don't have it.
Let me go over to Professor Pat Utomi. I saw you shaking your head there. I guess that's in response to what Professor Kenife was saying.
I can tell Ken what page in what particular Nigerian Economic Summit report he can get every line of what he has said. It's been said 20 times over in the numbers he has thrown out and all of that. What we're dealing with here is more than strategy. The key is execution. We need an execution premium. An execution premium comes from a passionate commitment to really making change happen. I think that, the first stage in making it happen is mobilizing the Nigerian people completely to say, this is where our country is going. This is where everybody has to focus on because of the common good of all. This is how we raise the bar. And you can be seen. It will be coming out of your ears, your nose. You excite people about it, and they follow, and they go in that direction. I sympathize, I respect Ken's perspective on this matter, and I agree completely. Look, we're talking solid minerals, because what frustrates me personally about Nigeria, I've been in this business 40 years talking about how Nigeria can make progress with all the passion that the good Lord has given me. And I go through it again, and I'm very hopeful. Then you have a leadership challenge that prevents it from going where it should go. The fact that we are talking solid minerals, as if we've just invented solid minerals. Interesting. We've been talking diversification of the base of this economy for 30 years at the very least. I can give you presentations that I have made on how that kind of should happen. Now we're talking mining now, giving the people impression that next week mining will contribute to GDP. Look, whatever we invest in mining will not even begin to show for another 15 years, 10 at the least. And so we've got to look at this from a stage perspective. What are the low-hanging fruits? What can we do to make a difference immediately?
So that's the question I'd like you to answer very quickly for us before we go then. What can we do very quickly in the short term, in the immediate term? I mean, with projections of 10,000 megawatts in another 3 years and all of that.
That's another thing. You see, that's part of what, again, worries me. We're projecting 10,000 megawatts in the next 3 years. I know, anybody who knows that Nigeria already has installed capacity of up to 10,000 megawatts. The system isn't enabling it to generate that, but there's installed capacity of 10,000 megawatts right now in Nigeria. Now, the other point is, I mean, about 15 years ago, I used to have these conferences at the Lagos Business School on the power sector. And Lieli Moke, who was then in the power sector before he went to be governor, and Joe Makoju came to this conference. And I recall the presentation that they made, and they said that if Nigeria were to have the per capita energy that South Africa has at this point, Nigeria would need to generate 88,000 megawatts. Now, when we keep talking about, in 3 years we'll have 10,000, it shows that we don't have that grand vision that I keep talking about. We just have to go and say, what is it that will make us generate 100,000 megawatts? What is it? And it's got to be private capital. What are the incentives that we can create for private capital to come from all over the world? A former minister of State in Finance called me one day, got off an aeroplane and called me and said, I'm sure you would like to hear this. I was coming on a flight, a West African flight, and the person obviously sitting by him from one of the West African countries didn't know he was a minister in Nigeria. He said to him, sir, let me ask you, this power problem you people have in Nigeria, is it that you people don't know where to go and buy the GE plants from? I can buy it for you if you need us. Power was taken care of 100 years ago. It's not rocket science. But we manage, because of the nature of our politics and the insincerity of our elite, to solve simple problems. And we continue to be the laughingstock of the world. Until we are ready to deal with the real issues, let's stop wasting time.
Okay,
all the summits in the world will solve it.
Dr. Patu Tomi, I want to say thank you very much for talking to us on TVC Breakfast this morning. Let me quickly go to Professor Ken. Are we just paying lip service to this idea of really moving the economy forward, or do you think we're actually laying the right foundations right now so that we can make some progress?
I think we are laying some foundation. I don't think we've gone far enough. And I agree with what Pat is saying, to the extent that we do need a new strategy for power generation. And I believe that we have to take power to the mass market. Until private sector, everybody knows how they can make money from power. That's only when you have investment flowing through our noses to power. And one of the areas is power, is solar power. If people can have things in their home, in the village, and then they can remit the surplus power to the national grid, and certified. It's all over Europe. But we are not even talking about that. And secondly, the minister's target, performance target, should be based on how many people are connected and how much power is available. If it is about how many power stations we are going to bring, then we will never move forward. When that is the target, the minister will go out to talk to everybody. Whoever has anything to do in power, whether it's solar or any, he will go out. That that has to be the change of emphasis. You're going to move that performance target to how many people are connected. If it's going to be 5 million people every year, or 10 or 5 megawatts every year, that should be the target. The minister will leave his office and go and find people who will deliver. And then you see that the answer is not far-fetched. The investment is there. But, we need to open up a bit more and be more inclusive.
And we have just one minister to handle these 3 vital areas, talking about infrastructure, housing, and of course, power. And many wonder how he will be able to deliver on these 3 fronts. Economist and Professor Ken Ife of the Africa Business Roundtable, thank you very much for being part of the show. And of course, Professor Patu Tommy, a former presidential advisor who joined us via Skype. Thank you too, gentlemen, for your time.